Hey, it's Ashlee from Smart Addition Academy, and in today's video, we are going over our GED practice exam for the mathematical reasoning section of the GED. So you can follow along while I solve these questions by using the link in the description for a free, full-length GED practice test. Okay, in the description below, you will also find a link to our GED online study course, which has everything you need to study to earn your GED. Okay, so we are going to jump into this and get started together. One thing I want you to know is the directions here. Okay, so you can use a calculator on this test section. However, the first 5 questions on the test, you will not be able to use a calculator. So you want to practice these questions without a calculator. So when we are doing this test, the first 5 you absolutely cannot use a calculator for. That will reflect what you can expect to see on the math section of the GED. There will be some questions where you can't use a calculator. As we go through, I will offer you some options where even if we can use a calculator, I will show you some tips for what you might do if you couldn't use a calculator for a question like that, just so you can get an idea of what to expect on some of these questions. All right, so let's get started. We're going to spend a little while together today doing 46 questions, so get comfortable. All right, so first question. A ticket to see a movie costs $8.50 at the local theater. Samuel goes and buys tickets for himself and his 2 friends. In addition, he buys a large popcorn for $6.75 and 3 sodas that each cost $3. If Samuel pays with a $50 gift card, how much money is the remaining balance? So I'm reading through the whole question. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a little close reading and try to figure out what important information here will help me solve. So the question at the end said, how much money is the remaining balance if he used that $50 gift card? So we need to find out how much he spent, and then 50 minus that will be the remaining balance. So each ticket costs $8.50. It says he goes and buys tickets for himself and his 2 friends. So how many tickets is that? So Samuel and then 2 other friends, this would be 3 tickets. Okay, so $8.50 is how much each one costs, but we're going to have to multiply that by 3. Then he also buys a large popcorn for $6.75 and 3 sodas for $3 each. So let's find how much he spends and subtract it from the $50 gift card. So if I were to just write this out, I know I'm going to have to do $8.50 times 3. Those are the 3 tickets. Then I'm going to add the $6.75 for the popcorn. And then he bought 3 sodas for $3 each. So we're going to multiply 3 times 3. Once I solve this whole thing, I will know how much he spent. So first step is to get rid of the multiplication. So $8.50 times 3. Remember, we can't use a calculator for this. So $8.50 times 3. So how do we multiply using decimals? Well, what we do is we are going to multiply the same way as if this was just a 3-digit number times a 1-digit number. Just do our multiplication algorithm, and then we'll figure out where the decimal goes. So we start in the ones place. 3 times 0 is 0. And then 3 times 5 is 15. So we have to write the 5 and carry the 1. And then we have to do 3 times 8, which is 24. And don't forget to add the 1. So that would be 25. So the decimal goes, there's 2 spaces here, right? So it goes over 2. And if we just kind of estimate, 8 times 3 would be $24. So we know it needs to be around 24 a little bit more. So $25.50 makes sense. So $25.50 plus $6.75, and then 3 times 3 is just 9. Now we need to add these together. So again, no calculator. So I'm going to set up using the algorithm. Make sure you line up your decimal places. Really important when we add decimals. 9 doesn't have a decimal, but it's hidden right here. So important to know when you have whole numbers, the decimal's hidden to the right of it. So I have to make sure I write it like this, and I'm going to add my placeholders. And now let's add these all together. So 1's place, 0 plus 5 plus 0 is 5. 5 plus 7 plus 0 is 12. And then let's go move over here. 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 6 more is 12, plus 9 is 21. And lastly, 2 plus 2 is 4. So it looks like Samuel spent $41.25. Does that answer our question? Okay, so the question says, if he bought everything with a $50 gift card, how much is the remaining balance? Well, the remaining balance would be the $50 minus what he spent, which is $41.25. So here now we need to subtract. So this is our last step. I'm going to show you how to use the algorithm here, but it can be a little tricky because we're subtracting across all of these zeros in 50, right? We got to go across all these zeros. And then I'll show you another thing that we could have done. So 0 minus 5, I can't do it. So I move over to the 0, nothing to borrow, nothing to borrow. But from the 5, I can borrow 1 and make that a 4. So this becomes a 10. Now I can borrow from that 10, make it a 9, turn this into a 10. Now I can borrow from that, make that a 9, and now this is a 10, and I can do 10 minus 5, 9 minus 2, 9 minus 1, make sure you bring down your decimal, and then 4 minus 4 would just be 0. So 875 is my remaining balance. And the other thing that we can do in these questions that can be really helpful is estimate. So if I had $50 minus 41 instead of 41.25, this would be a little bit easier to do without the algorithm. This would be 9. So I know my answer needs to be similar to 9, somewhere close to 9. 875 is the closest one on there. So you can also use estimation to help with a lot of these questions that you cannot use a calculator. All right, let's check out our next question. Here we have some polynomial addition. So we need to do negative 3x squared minus 2xy plus 4y squared plus 5x squared plus 3xy minus 3y squared. So in this question, the parentheses actually don't do anything. So all we're really doing is just combining like terms. So negative 3x squared plus 5x squared would be a positive 2x squared. Negative 2xy plus 3xy would be a positive 1xy, or just positive xy. And then 4y squared minus 3y squared would just be 1y squared or y squared. So important to be comfortable with our integers, adding and subtracting those integers in order to do some of these questions without a calculator. So our final answer, 2x squared plus xy plus y squared. All right, answer without a calculator, 96 divided by 12. So just by looking at my answer key here, some of these don't seem reasonable to me if I'm taking 96 and dividing it by 12. But just to be sure, I'm going to round. I'm going to do some estimation to see about what my answer should be. So 96 is pretty close to 100. 12 is pretty close to 10. So if I did 100 divided by 10, that would give me 10. So my answer needs to be close to 10. And 8 is the closest by far. So I'm thinking 8 is correct. If I wanted to use the division algorithm here, 96 divided by 12, I would have to see how many times 12 goes into 96. The fact that I'm already thinking 8 is the right answer, I'm going to do 12 times 8 and see what I get. 2 times 8 is 16. 1 times 8 is 8, plus 1 is 9. I do get 96, so it looks like 8 is correct. So just by using estimation, I could find the answer, and even if I want to just use it to help me with the division, it could be really helpful. All right, still not using a calculator here. Let's do some binomial multiplication. 5x minus 3 times 5x plus 3. So what can be really helpful here when we're multiplying binomials is to think of the acronym FOIL. FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, last. So let me show you what that looks like. When we are multiplying, we want to do the first term in each set of parentheses. So 5x times 5x, that would give me 25x squared. Now, O stands for outer. We're going to do the outermost term in each parenthesis. So 5x times 3 would be 15x. Inner is the innermost term in each parenthesis. They're right next to each other. Negative 3 times 5 is negative 15x. And then negative 3 times 3, last would be the last term in each set of parentheses. So this would be minus 9. And then all I have to do is combine like terms. It looks like positive 15 and negative 15 will cancel out. So I'm just left with 25x squared minus 9. And if you remember from factoring using the difference of perfect squares method, you get a conjugate pair. The middle term cancels out. You might have been able to see from the question that that was coming. So that could help you narrow down your options as well. All right. Got one more question here that we can't use a calculator. A small landscaping company mows lawns and has 3 5.4 gallon gas cans. One day, the landscapers empty the gas cans 3 times. How many gallons of gas did they use? So if they have 3 5.4 gallon gas cans and they empty them 3 times, how many gallons did they use? So 3 times 5.4 would be the total amount of gas in those 3 gas cans. Then if we multiply it by 3 one more time, we would get the total that they needed to use since they had to fill up all those cans 3 times. So when we are multiplying, we can actually do this in any order. So remember, multiplication has that commutative property. We can do it in any order. So I'm going to start by actually doing 3 times 3. So I could essentially rewrite this as 3 times 3 times 5.4. And I'm going to do 3 times 3 first, which is 9. And then I have to do times 5.4. And here, since we can't use a calculator, let's use our algorithm again. 5.4 times 9. So 4 times 9 is 36. 5 times 9 is 45, plus 3 is 48. And we only have one number to the right of the decimal place, so our decimal will go right there, 48.6. Again, estimation could be really helpful for a question like this. If you knew 3 times 3 was 9, let's round it to 10 and then multiply it by 5.4 is close to 5, so we know our answer should be around 50. Okay, so that could be helpful and also is pretty validating when we look at our answer of 48.6. So if some of these algorithms are tricky to you and you're having a hard time remembering, know that there will be times when you could just estimate and use friendlier numbers to help make your life a little easier, especially on the questions that you can't use a calculator. All right, let's move on to the next section of this exam. If 17 widgets failed, but the other 1,273 worked properly, what is the failure rate of that widget? So don't get caught off by the word widget, okay? It might be like, you're like, oh, what does that mean? I don't know what that word means. It doesn't really matter, okay? Let's just think about what we know. So 17 widgets, whatever, don't know what that is, whatever that is fine. 17 failed out of how many? So 17 failed, but the other 1,273 worked properly. So if we add these together, we will have the total. And now we can use a calculator, so you can just plug this right in your calculator. So it should be 17 over 1,290. So the failure rate is going to be what happens when we divide this and then turn it into a percent. Notice all of my options are percents. So when I go and divide this, okay, right, plug it right in your calculator, you'll get 0.0131778. Okay, now to turn this into a percent means out of 100. So we need to essentially multiply by 100, which is the same thing as swooping to the right twice. So our answer here would be 1.3178%. And it looks like we are rounding to the nearest hundredth. Okay, 2 decimal places. So this 1 here is going to round up because the 7 is greater than 5, right? 5 or more, we go up. 5 or more, let it soar, you might have heard. So 1.32% would be the failure rate. All right, which one is different than the others? So let's see, 6.4%, 8 over 125, and then 128 to 2,000. These are all in different forms. If I can get them in the same form, then I can actually compare these a little easier. So I'm going to turn these into decimals. 6.4%. Now we're going from a percent to a decimal. We need to just swoop to the left twice. So this would be 0.064. 8 over 125. All we have to do is divide. This fraction bar just means divide. So 8 divided by 125 is also 0.064. And then 128 over 2,000 is how we can rewrite this ratio. And then we can again just divide, and we should once again get 0.064. So our answer has to be the final option, that all of the above are equal. All right, interesting question. How many prime numbers are less than 20 but greater than 0? So prime numbers, this is a vocab word we want to be comfortable with. A prime number is just any number that only has factors of 1 and itself. So what that means is that the only way to multiply and get this number is 1 times itself. So if we look at numbers that are greater than 0 but less than 20, we need to check and see which ones are prime. So is 1 a prime number? Technically, it's not, because the only factors, well, the only factor, there's only one, is just 1. 1 times 1 gives you 1. It's the only way to get it. So technically, 1 is not a prime number. It doesn't fit that definition. So let's check 2. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 is a prime number. 3 is a prime number. 4 is not, because you could do 2 times 2. So the fact that there's another set of factors means it's not prime. So I'm just going to go through and check. So 4, no. 5 is. 6 is not, but 7 is. 8, 9, and don't get caught up in the odd numbers. 9 is not prime because you can do 3 times 3, right? So you'll notice that 2 is the only even prime number. So any other even numbers are not prime because 2 goes into them. So now I'm just going to keep checking. 11 is prime. 13 is prime. 15 is not, because 3 times 5 is 15. 17, and we have 19. So we want less than 20, so that's it. Those are the only ones. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 prime numbers that are greater than 0 and less than 20. All right, which number will appear farthest right on a standard number line? So thinking about what a number line looks like, say we have 0 in the middle. Numbers to the right are positive. So the farthest right will be the highest, the largest positive number. And the only positives here are 32 and 512. So the largest one is 512. That one would be farthest to the right. All right, let's evaluate the expression 15 times negative 15. So it's important to know that a positive times a negative is a negative. So my answer needs to be negative. I can get rid of 0 as my option. Now, all I have to do is 15 times 15, which I can plug into my calculator, and we would get 225. So negative 225 is my answer. If I wanted to, say this was a question that you couldn't use a calculator, and if you came across it in a different context, if we had to do 15 times 15 using the algorithm, we would start the same way. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 2 is 7. Now to move over, I'm done with this, to move over to this 1, we need to add a placeholder, because this isn't really a 1, it's a 10. So 1 times 5 is 5, 1 times 1 is 1, and now I can add these together to get 225. Because it's a positive times a negative, it needs to be negative. Okay, so we could have done this without a calculator if we needed to. So again, important to be comfortable with those algorithms. All right. A regular hexagon has a side length of 5 inches and an apothem of 2 inches. Find the area in square inches. So the area formula that we are going to use is actually given here. This is not the one that's on your formula sheet. So this one is given to you. So the area is equal to 1/2. The A stands for the apothem, and the P actually stands for perimeter. So we need to find the apothem and the perimeter. So let's plug in what we know. We know the apothem is 2. Now, how do we find the perimeter? So perimeter of a regular hexagon. So a hexagon has 6 sides. When we hear regular in terms of polygons, different shapes, that means that all the sides are the same. So a regular hexagon means that every side is 5. So the perimeter would be 5 times how many sides are there? 6. So 5 times 6 is 30. Okay, so I'm just going to plug that in for my perimeter. So 1/2 times 2 is 1, and then 1 times 30 would just be 30. So my area here is 30. All right. If the term of a mobile phone contract is in multiples of a year, which duration can a customer choose? So multiples of a year. All of my answers are in months. So let's turn a year into months and see which one of these options come up. So 1 year is 12 months. So 2 years would be 12 plus 12, which is 24. 3 years would be 36. 4 years would be 48, and so on. Let's see if any of these are here. 6 is not a multiple of a year. 18 is not, but 24 is. So it looks like 24 months is the only term that works for this question. All right, here is a question about median. So when we hear median, we want to think of the middle. So when you're driving a car, a median would be in the middle of the 2 lanes of traffic. So median, you want to think middle. In order to find the middle piece of data, they need to be in an order. So we need to go in order from least to greatest and then find the middle. So I'm going to take the data I was given and start putting in order. So the lowest I see is 31. Now I'm going to scan and just cross them off as I go so I don't forget any. See 32, see 33, and it looks like there's actually 2 33s. Okay, and then we've got a 34. And this can be a little bit tedious because you don't want to miss any. You want to make sure that you put it in the right order because that will definitely affect your answer. So it just might take you a minute to make sure that you have it in the right order and you didn't forget anything. 37, another 37, and then I see a 38 and a 39. All right, so now to find the median, find the one in the middle, I'm just going to cross off one at the beginning, one at the end. Beginning, end, beginning, end, beginning, end, beginning, end, and I'm left with 2 numbers here, 35 and 35. They happen to be the same, so that is actually just my median. If they were different numbers, you would just find the average of the 2, what's in the middle of those 2 numbers. And in this case, since they're the same, that is just our median, 35. All right. A wedge of cheese is in the shape of a right triangular prism. The area of the base is 30 square inches. What is the height in inches of the cheese if the volume is 150 cubic inches? So this would be a question that we want to refer to our formula sheet to find the volume formula, okay? So we're looking for volume here. We're going to have to find a missing dimension, but the formula we need to use is volume. So the volume for a prism is area of the base times the height. So we denote that with a big B, area of the base. So let's plug in what we know. We know the volume is 150. The area of the base, they told us, is 30. And then the question is asking me to find the height, so I'm going to leave that as H. Now, very important skill in the GED is being able to solve for what we are missing, solve for the unknown. So in this case, 30 times H, we need to divide each side by 30 to find the height. So the height would have to equal 150 divided by 30, which is 5. All right, here is another geometry question. A rectangular pyramid has a length of 10 inches, a width of 11 inches, and a height of 12 inches. Find the volume in cubic inches. So again, choosing the correct formula, we are going to need volume of a pyramid. So look at your formula sheet, and you will find that the volume is equal to 1/3 the area of the base, that's that big B, times the height. So let's plug in what we know. We're going to find the volume. So area of the base. So the base is rectangular. This always tells you what type of base there is. So the length times the width will give me the area of the base. So 10 times 11 would be 110. And then the height is 12. So now all I have to do is use my calculator to multiply 1/3 times 110 times 12, and I should get 440 as my volume. What is the intersection of two walls in a room? So sometimes it can be helpful to draw a picture. So say we have a wall, and then there's another wall here. So the intersection would be this here. So which of our options best describes this intersection? So a ray would be something that goes on and on from a point. A line be something like this. Technically that's a line segment, but could look like a line. A point is just a dot, and then a plane is actually like one of these walls would actually be a plane. So that's like 2 dimensions. So it looks like a line would be our best answer in this question. If a line segment had been an option, that might have been a better option. But given what we have here, we have to choose the most educated guess. The best option here would be a line. All right, a circle has an area of 12 square feet. Find the diameter to the nearest tenth of a foot. Use 3.14 for pi. So using our formula sheet, we can find that the area of a circle is equal to pi times the radius squared. So we need to find the diameter. In order to find the diameter, if we find the radius, we can double it, and that will give us our diameter. So important to know how these things are related. Let's plug in what we know. Area is 12. Told us to use 3.14 for pi. And then, oops, sorry, that came out a little messy. Let me try that again. 3.14 for pi. And then the radius squared. So first thing we want to do is divide by 3.14. So we will find that our radius squared is equal to about 3.785. Okay, in order to find the radius from here, we have to take the square root of both sides. So when we take the square root of both sides, we get that the radius is about 1.9. So we can just round that to 2. So if the radius is 2, the diameter would be twice that, which is 4. All right, next question. Let's solve this equation by any method. So solving a quadratic, we have a few options. We have learned that we could use factoring, we could use the quadratic formula, we could use the square root method. Completing the square, there's a few different ways that we could do this. So looking at this question, it looks like it might be fairly easy to get x squared by itself. And if I can get x squared by itself, I can just take the square root and then I have x by itself. So first thing I want to do is work towards getting x squared by itself. So if we add 70 to both sides, that will help. So 2x squared equals 72. Now our next step would be to divide by 2, and we would find that x squared is equal to 36. And then from here, all I have to do is take the square root of both sides. And the square root of 36 is 6. And we have to just remember when we do quadratics, when we're solving square roots, we should have a plus or minus. So plus or minus 6 would be my solution. All right, which decimal is the least? So when comparing decimals, you want to start in the largest place value and then work your way to the right. So in the ones place, all of these have 2. So now I'm going to move over to my tenths place. So I see a 2, 0, 0, and 2. So I'm looking for the least. That means that the 0 is the least. And now just to compare these last 2 options, look at your hundredths place, 2 and 0. Well, if I need the least, then this would have to be my solution, 2, and this would be 2 thousandths, 2 and 2 thousandths. All right, there is an election at a school where 5 candidates out of 10 will be elected. Which object and results are the most appropriate for a simulation? So 5 out of 10 would be elected. Which object and results are the most appropriate for a simulation? So a simulation is just using more tangible items or things in order to find the expected probability. So if we were to toss a coin, think about tossing a coin, say you wanted to get heads, that would be 1 out of 2. So 1 out of 2 is equal to 5/10. So the only thing about this is that it doesn't actually tell us what we're looking for. It doesn't say heads or tails. So toss a coin and get heads or tails would technically be 2 out of 2. So I feel like this one doesn't have enough information, but technically the fractions are equivalent. So I might leave this as a maybe. Let's see if we have any better options. A 10-sided cube and use multiples of 2. So if we have a 10-sided cube, there would be 10 options. Multiples of 2 would be 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So there would be 5 out of 10. Well, that matches up perfectly with what we started with, right? So that one looks good. 8-sided spinner and use the odd numbers. So again, 1, 3, 5, 7. This would be 4 out of 8, which is equivalent, but it's not exact like 5/10, so that one seems like a better option still. And then lastly, throw 2 6-sided number cubes and use the results of 1 and 6. This would be 2 out of 6, which would not be equivalent. That'd be equivalent to 1/3. So definitely the second option is our best bet. So sometimes they make these questions a little bit confusing because you may think that multiple answers could theoretically be correct. You want to choose the one that most closely matches. All right, let's convert 2.5 miles to feet. So an important conversion that you might be given, you might not be given. This is one that maybe they, want you to have memorized. We need to take 2.5 miles, turn it into feet. We need to know how many feet are in 1 mile. So a mnemonic I use is 5 tomatoes. So if we're going from feet to miles or miles to feet, okay, the conversion that's helpful is 1 mile equals 5,280. So 5,280 feet. Okay, 5 tomatoes, 5,280. That could be really helpful to remember. So 2.5 times 5,280 will give me how many feet are in 2.5 miles. So again, this is one where we can use our calculator. So let that do the hard work for you. Multiply it on your calculator, and you should find that we get 13,200 feet. All right, the histogram below shows the amount a family spent on groceries during the year. Which statement is true for the histogram? All right, so we have a histogram with the frequency here, and then how much they spent on groceries is on the bottom. So let's look at our options and see which one matches the histogram. The lowest frequency is between 80 and 110. That would be here. But I noticed there is a lower frequency actually from 201 to 230. So that one does not work. Highest frequency is between 140 and 170. So that's here, but I see one that is higher there. More than half of the amount spent is greater than 140. So let's see. Is this more than half? 13. This would be 7. This would be 3. I think, yeah, 3. So that would be 23. But if we're talking about throughout the year, this is 52 weeks. So 23 is not more than half. So hopefully this last one works. More than half of the amount spent is between 110 and 170. So 13, and then this one is 14. So 13 plus 14 is 27, which is more than half of the weeks in the year. So this one does work out to be option number 4. Okay, so this is just process of elimination. Go through each question or each answer for the question and see if it makes sense. All right, let's simplify using some exponent rules here. X to the third times y to the negative second over x to the negative second times y to the third, all raised to the 5th power. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to simplify the inside first and then raise it to the 5th power. So x to the third over x to the negative second. When we're dividing exponents with the same base, we subtract them. So 3 minus negative 2 would be a positive 5. And then y to the negative second divided by y to the third would be y to the negative 5th, which we can rewrite as 1 over y to the 5th. So I can actually simplify all that inside of the parentheses here. Now when we raise this to the 5th power, we are multiplying the exponents. So this would become x to the 25th over y to the 25th. Let me try to write that a little neater so you can see y to the 25th, and then take a look at your options and just make sure you choose the one that matches this. So make sure the x is on the top and the y is on the bottom. All right, let's solve the system of equations. Negative 2x plus 2y equals 28, and then 3x plus y equals negative 22. So in order to solve this, we have to choose substitution or elimination. I'm going to go with elimination, and I'm going to multiply this bottom by negative 2 to get my y's to cancel out. So I have, just rewrite this one, negative 2x plus 2y equals 28. And then now when I multiply the bottom one, this would become negative 6x minus 2y equals a positive 44. And when I add these together, my y's are going to cancel out. So I will end up with negative 8x equals 72. And when I divide each side by negative 8, x would equal negative 9. So I know my x value needs to be negative 9. So I can actually go through and get rid of a couple options off the bat. In order to solve for y, I'm just going to plug negative 9 into one of my equations. I'm going to choose the bottom one. Might be a little easier to get y by itself with that one. So 3 times negative 9 plus y equals negative 22. So 3 times negative 9 is negative 27. Negative 27 plus y equals negative 22. And when I add 27 to both sides to get it to cancel out, I should get y equals 5. So x equals negative 9, y equals 5 would be the coordinate. Remember, it's always x and then y. All right, let's try this next one. Solve the equation by completing the square. So the fact that this tells us to complete the square, I'm going to do it in that way. If you had another strategy that you wanted to use, it's a multiple choice question. So you could use another strategy as long as you get one of these answers, then you're good to go. Maybe you want to use quadratic formula or something like that. So that is something to consider. Because it says completing the square, let's just practice that. So first thing I do when I have to solve by completing the square is I move the constant over. So x squared minus 2x equals 37. Okay, equals 37. So I left a space here because I'm going to have to add some special number to make this a perfect square on the left. And then if whatever I do on the left, I have to do on the right because this is an equation. We need to keep balance. So what is this special number? Well, you take the middle term, which is negative 2. Okay, so you take this middle term, you divide it by 2, and then you square it. That is how you find the number that needs to be added to make it a perfect square. So negative 2 divided by 2 is negative 1, squared is a positive 1. So I'm going to add 1 to each side of this equation. What that allows me to do is rewrite the left as a perfect square. So this would have to be x minus 1 squared, and that would equal 37 plus 1 is 38. So if you don't see how I got this left side of the equation, just think about factoring this, okay? So I need it to multiply to positive 1 and add to negative 2. So 1 times 1 is 1, but they both need to be negative in order to get the negative 2. So I basically just skip that step of factoring. Now I need to get x by itself, so I need to take the square root of both sides. So on the left, I'd be left with x minus 1, and that's going to equal plus or minus the square root of 38. And then last step, just add 1 to both sides. We tend to put it in the front. So 1 plus or minus the square root of 38 would be our final answer. If a letter is chosen at random from the word substitute, what is the probability that the letter chosen is S or T? So this is a classic probability question. You will definitely see a question like this on the GED. When we're talking about probability, we want the desired event over the total number of outcomes. So the desired event here is an S or a T. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those letters fit that desired outcome. So 5 out of the total number of letters, the total outcome. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 5 out of 10 would be the probability. Now, I don't see that as an answer here, right? 5 out of 10 is not an option. So we want to look and simplify if we can. So 5 and 10 share a factor of 5. So we can divide each by 5 and get 1 over 2. So 1/2. What is the order of rotational symmetry for a parallelogram? So there's some important vocab here. Order of rotational symmetry, and we have to know what a parallelogram is. So if we remember from geometry, a parallelogram looks like this. And order of rotational symmetry basically means when I turn or rotate this shape, how many times does it land on itself when I go a full 360-degree circle? Okay, so if I were to rotate this once, for example, it would end up looking something like this, which is not how we started, right? It's more horizontal where we started. So it doesn't work just by rotating it 90 degrees, but what happens if I rotate it one more time and 180? It would actually land on itself. It would look like we started. So that happens once, and then if I keep rotating again, it always happens again at 360 degrees. So that would be 2 times, okay, twice this parallelogram lands on itself in a full 360-degree circle. So the order of rotational symmetry is 2. A spinner contains numbers 1 through 20. What is the probability of spinning a multiple of 3 or a multiple of 5? So again, desired event over total number of outcomes. So we need to figure out the desired event, which is spinning a multiple of 3 or a multiple of 5. Out of the total number, if it's 1 through 20, we know there are 20 options. So 20 is going to go on the bottom. Now, how many multiples of 3 or 5 are there? So it goes from 1 to 20. So multiples of 3, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. Okay, so we only go up to 20. So that's all we have for multiples of 3. And then multiples of 5 would be 5, 10, 15 we've already got, and then 20. So we can't double dip and put 15 twice because there's only one part of the spinner that has 15. So now how many total options are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this would be 9 out of 20 as our probability. So desired event out of total number of outcomes is an important formula to know for probability. All right, a basketball has a diameter of 10 inches. What is the volume in cubic inches inside the ball? Use 3.14 for pi. So we go to our formula sheet and we need to find the correct formula. So volume, okay, of what shape is a basketball? So volume of a sphere. So if we look at the volume of a sphere, that is 4/3 pi times the radius cubed, radius to the 3rd power. So it's telling us that the diameter is 10 and we want to use 3.14 for pi. So let's plug in what we know. Instead of pi, I'm going to use 3.14. And then this formula wants me to plug in the radius. If I know the diameter is 10, the radius is half of that. So my radius that I'm going to plug in is 5. So from here, now I just have to use order of operations to simplify this to find the volume. So first thing I have to do is 5 to the 3rd power. Okay, so I've been doing math a long time. Sometimes when I'm doing volume of a sphere, I accidentally do to the 2nd power just out of habit. So really be careful when you're looking at your formulas and plug it in correctly. So we have to do 5 to the 3rd power, which would be 125, and then we can multiply 4/3 times 3.14 times 125. And if looks like all of these are to the 100th place, it looks like our volume would be 523 and 33/100ths. All right, let's find the values from this box plot. So a box plot, sometimes called a box and whisker plot, has 5 important values. We have the minimum, and then the maximum. And then we have this box, which is the quartiles. So we have quartiles, quartile 1. Quartile 2 is here. This is also called the median in the middle. And then this other straight line is quartile 3. So let's match up the numbers with our options. So the minimum, it looks like, is here, which is a half. So get rid of these 2. First quartile is 3. Okay, median is 4.5. Third quartile is 7, and then the maximum is 9. So it looks like option 2 is correct. So use process of elimination to help you narrow it down, and then that's the only one that fits our graph. All right, let's solve the equation for the unknown. X over 2 plus 5 equals 8. When we are trying to solve for a variable, we want to get rid of everything that's attached to it. So the first thing here is to subtract 5 from both sides. So I'll be left with x over 2 on the left, and 8 minus 5 is 3. So now it's x divided by 2 equals 3. Opposite or inverse operation means to multiply each side by 2, and 3 times 2 is 6. So x equals 6. You can plug it back in. 6 divided by 2, which is 3, plus 5 does equal 8. So a lot of the times, if you just take an extra 10 seconds, you can plug in your answer and make sure you have it correct. All right, let's find the range for this set of data. So range, okay, important to know this vocab word. Range just means max minus min. So let's find our maximum and our minimum value. So I'm just going to scan through this data. Looks like that's my maximum of 65. And what's my minimum? 27, it looks like. So 65 minus 27, plug that into your calculator, and you will get 38 as your range for this set of data. One athlete had a salary of about 3 times 10 to the 7th dollars per year, and another athlete had a salary of about 2 times 10 to the 6th dollars per year. How many times larger is the salary of the first athlete? So don't be overwhelmed or intimidated by the fact that they're using scientific notation. Okay, we will plug that in when we get there. We have to answer this question. How many times larger is the salary of the first? So the salary of the first, as it was given, is just 3 times 10 to the 7th. So if we divide that by the salary of the second, we'll find how many times larger it is. So the salary of the second was 2 times 10 to the 6th. So when we are working with scientific notation, there are 2 options. You have a calculator. You could just multiply and find out what each of these represent, like 3 times 10 to the 7th. What does that represent? Okay, you could do that and then divide. You could also just divide the constants in front and then divide the exponents, and then we can multiply from there. So let's try that. 3 over 2 is just 1.5. And then 10 to the 7th divided by 10 to the 6th. So same base of 10, 7 minus 6 is 1. So this is just 1.5 times 10, which would be 15. So 15 times greater would be your solution. A group is conducting a survey at a mall asking shoppers their opinion of the mall. What type of sampling is used? So if you are asking people about the mall while you are at the mall, okay, this is just going to be what we would call convenience sampling. Convenience sampling literally is, as it sounds, what is convenient. Okay, if I want to know what people think of the Wendy's burger. I'm going to go to Wendy's. What do people like most about math class? I'll stand outside of math class and ask. Those are examples of convenience sampling. So when we are talking about statistical measures and different ways to do surveys and take information, it's important to know a few of these. Convenience sampling is exactly as it sounds. If it's convenient, okay, for what you're looking for, then we may be looking at convenience sampling. All right, let's solve this equation by factoring. X squared minus 5x minus 50 equals 0. So factoring, we use the product sum method, which can be really helpful. I like to make this little x and think, okay, product here, negative 50. So it needs to multiply to negative 50. And then it needs to add to the middle term, which is negative 5. So factors of negative 50, that would add to negative 5. So when thinking about factors of 50, the first one that pops into my head is 5 and 10. So if I have a negative 10 and a positive 5, that would add and give me the negative 5 that I'm looking for. So what do I do with those factors? Well, when we're factoring, we typically have our sets of parentheses. And then I just put in x minus 10. That's one of my factors. And then x plus 5 is my other factor. And then I just have to set each of those equal to 0 and solve. So x minus 10 equals 0 means that x has to equal positive 10. X plus 5 equals 0 means x has to equal negative 5. So positive 10, negative 5 would be my solutions to this equation. Find the area in square centimeters of a circle with a diameter of 16 centimeters. Use 3.14 for pi. So area in square centimeters of a circle. So area of a circle we can find on our formula sheet. Area equals pi times the radius squared. So if the diameter is 16, what is the radius? Well, it's going to be half of that. So that would be radius of 8. Now I'm going to use 3.14 for pi. So let's plug in what we know and then find our area. So area is going to equal 3.14 times 8 squared. So 8 squared is 64. So all we have to do is 3.14 times 64. Plug that on in your calculator, let it do the hard work for you, and you should get 200.96. All right, the area of a half circle is 48 square centimeters. Find the circumference of the curved portion of the half circle to the nearest tenth of a centimeter and use 3.14 for pi. So looks like we're going to need a couple formulas here. Area of a circle is pi times the radius squared. Because we are dealing with a half circle, we have to make sure that we divide this by 2. So let's plug in what we know. 48 is our area. Pi is 3.14, so it looks like we're going to solve for our radius. And then we can use that to help us find the circumference. So first thing we want to do is multiply each side by 2. 96 would equal 3.14 radius squared. Divide that by 3.14. And you'll find that the radius squared is approximately 30.57. So that gives me a radius when I take the square root of both sides. That gives me a radius of about 5.5. So if my radius is 5.5, let's go back to our formula sheet and see if we can use that to help us with our circumference. So there's 2 formulas for circumference, pi times diameter or 2 pi times the radius. So we can actually plug the radius in here. And remember, again, this is half of a circle, so we have to actually divide by 2, which will make this end up canceling out. So all we have to do is the circumference is going to equal 3.14 times 5.5. And when we do that, we get about 17.5 0.3. Cool. All right. Let's find the mode for this data set. So when we are finding the mode, we are looking for what happens the most often. So I'm just going to go through and try to figure out how many times each number happens. So 42 is the first one I come across. So I see that once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. So 42 happens 5 times. So I'm just going to make a little, maybe let's make a little frequency table here. So 42 happens, I'm just going to write 5 here on the other side of the table so I remember. Okay, 45 is next. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 45 also happens 5 times. All right, next thing we come across is 44. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Interesting. So 44 also happens 5 times. And it looks like we got 46, which just happens twice. So definitely not it. 41 is once, 48 is once, 47 is once. All right, so that's it. So when you have a mode, it could be one number, or in this case, you have multiple numbers that happen the same amount of times, and that's the most times you see a number. So these are all the mode. 42, 44, and 45 would all be the mode of this set of data. All right, a person has $250 in a checking account and writes checks for $70, $85, $60, and $100, and there's also a fee for $20. What is the balance of the account? So if you think about an account, you start with $250. You have to subtract what they write checks for, and then it looks like there's also a fee of $20, so we're spending $20 as well. So I'm going to add up the checks here just to figure out how much they're spending. So 70 plus 85 plus 60 plus 100. Okay, that gives me 315. That's how much they are spending when they write checks. If we also add in the $20 fee, they actually end up spending $335. So if you start with $250, okay, and you subtract 335, you will get your answer. So here, if you think about this, our answer should be negative. This person is going to have a negative balance because they're spending more than they have. So that actually allows me to get rid of a couple options. And then the difference between 250 and 335 is 85, so you would have negative 85. But if you weren't sure if integers are not your favorite, of the two options, 250 minus 335 definitely wouldn't be negative 335. So this is the only reasonable answer anyway. All right, let's change 375 thousandths to a fraction and simplify. So the way that I said that number, 375 thousandths, actually gives us a hint as to how to write the fraction. So you take 375 and you put it over 1,000. So whatever that ending place value is, in this case it's 1,000, that is our denominator. So now we have to simplify. So what goes into 375 and 1,000? So you could start just by dividing by 5 and then simplify further and further and further. I am going to, actually I see that 125 goes into both of these, so I'm going to divide each top and bottom by 125. Okay, but you could totally get here by working with smaller numbers until you get to where there's no more factors that they share. So when I divide each of these by 125, I'll get 3 as my numerator and 8 as my denominator. So 3/8. All right, a box in the shape of a right rectangular prism has dimensions of 6 centimeters by 7 centimeters by 8 centimeters. What is the volume? So the volume of a prism, a right rectangular prism specifically, is length times width times height. You might remember we talked about the volume of a prism before, and we did area of the base times height. That's the exact same formula here. The area of our rectangular base would just be the length times the width. So all I have to do is plug in my length, my width, and my height. So I get that my volume is going to equal 6 times 7 times 8. So this is another one of those questions where you can just let the calculator do the hard work for you. And when you plug in 6 times 7 times 8, you should get 336 as your answer. All right, a doctor wants to study the effects of a low-fat diet in patients. What would be needed to create an observational study? So an observational study is not an experiment where you are having like a control group and really comparing. You're really just observing and seeing what happens. So if we see how many fat calories are eaten and track people's weight, we're just observing what happens in order to find a pattern. So that would be option number 1. All right, this next question, let's solve by graphing. Y equals 1/3 x plus 2 and y equals 2/3 x plus 5. So to do this question, we need to know how to graph our equation. So 1/3 x plus 2 has a y-intercept of 2 and a slope of 1/3. So let's see. Y-intercept of 2, well, this does not have a y-intercept of 2. So let's keep going. Does not have a y-intercept of 2. All right, y-intercept of 2, and then up 1/3. This one looks good for the first equation, and then y-intercept of 2, up 1 over, this is only up 1 over 1.5. So the only one that even matches up with that first equation is 3, and we could definitely go through and double check and make sure that it matches the second equation, which is y equals 2/3 x plus 5. So the third one, 2/3 x plus 5, we have a y-intercept of 5, and then up 2/3. That does work. So option number 3, it is. All right, we are wrapping it up here. Got a couple more questions. Thanks for trugging along. You are really going to be prepared for this GED exam. So this question says, apply the polynomial identity to rewrite x squared plus 20x plus 100. So if this verbiage to you is confusing, you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. Let's just try to factor this. Okay, notice how all of our options look like factored forms. So we have to figure out which one is correct. So what multiplies to 100? I remember we talked about this little visual that can be helpful, the product sum, what multiplies to 100 and adds to 20. So factors of 100 that add to 20, it looks like 10 and 10 would be our best bet. So what this means is we can rewrite this in factored form as x plus 10 times x plus 10, which is the same thing as x plus 10, the quantity squared. So make sure all of that is in parentheses, x plus 10 squared. All right, let's solve the inequality for the unknown. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of these parentheses. So let's distribute this 1/2. So I have 1/2 times 4, which would be 2x plus 3/2. And that's going to be less than 3/4 x plus 2. So what I want to do here is get the x's on the same side of the equation. So subtract 3/4 x from both sides. So 2 is the same thing as 8/4. So 8/4 minus 3/4 would be 5/4 x. And then really what I want to do here too to get x by itself is subtract 3/2. So 2 is the same thing as 4/2. So this would be 5/4. X is less than 1/2. And then my last step to get x by itself, I can just multiply by the reciprocal. And when I do that, simplify this a little bit here, I should get x is less than 2/5. So I just did a little cross canceling to simplify before I multiply, but you could also just multiply at the end. All right, last question. Let's wrap it up. A pair of jeans with tax costs $39.97 and a shirt with tax costs $18.49. What is the amount of change for a pair of jeans and 2 shirts if paying with a $100 bill? So we are paying for a pair of jeans and 2 shirts. So a pair of jeans is $39.97 plus 2 shirts. So 2 times $18.49. So let's just simplify this to figure out how much we are spending. So when I multiply this and then add the $39.97, I get $76.95. So if we're paying with a $100 bill, 100 minus $76.95, again, let the calculator do the hard work for you. You will end up with $23.05 as your change. All right, so we made it through our practice GED exam. I hope you found this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.